They can't predict where he's going to go back, where he's going to go forward. So that, for instance, with the tariff situation, America's three biggest trading partners are Mexico, Canada, and China, in that order. He said that he promised throughout the campaign that he was going to put on tariffs day one. He's now backed off of that and said, no, actually, I'm going to do it on the 1st of February. What he's exactly going to do, what the negotiations are behind the scenes, we don't know. He manages to pass threaten whoever he is dealing with. He spoke virtually to Davos and rattled sabers and said, you got to do this or there will be major consequences. You've got to invest in the United States. But then he back a little bit. So what's going to happen with Canada or with Mexico, with China? I happen to be in Los Angeles, which has been having a terrible fire season. A lot of people are going to be watching very carefully how he reacts. To rebuild Los Angeles, because we've lost thousands of structures, is going to require Canadian hardwoods and Mexican workers. How is he going to deal with that?
Well, yes.
Might I just add one point here to Professor Alex is quite correct assumption, because we have to remember that in the United States and perhaps other countries, domestic reaction is important. That is to say, Trump may be on his own right now, but he has to pull back if he doesn't have support, and especially that's going to become the case after the first 2 years. So we have to remember that foreign policy for the United States is really, in a sense, an extension of domestic policy and preference.
Yes, indeed. Well, before we move on to Dr. Lian-Xun, I have to say, Professor Allison, the wildfire in Los Angeles indeed is very concerning, and we do hope that you stay safe. Now, Dr. Tong, you are an expert on arms control. You have understanding and observations on, the development of NATO as a military alliance, perhaps one of the most noticeable alliance in the world today. In his first term in the White House, Trump famously said NATO is obsolete. President Emmanuel Macron said NATO is brain dead. Now, Trump is talking again about NATO countries, NATO European countries, speeding up their efforts to increase military expenditures and that. We also have the Ukraine crisis going on. So how do you think Trump's second term in the White House is going to influence the fate of NATO?
Of course, this is actually very important military organization established during the Cold War time, and the Trump administration will continue to ask the member states in that organization to continue to increase its military spending even from 2% to 5% in the coming years. So I think, as we discussed just now, this is actually a very strong policy by Trump administration, and to some extent, NATO has already become military tool for regional liberation or affairs. And this time, I'm sure Trump would like to say something about the support to the organization and to say something about the withdrawal of the from the organization, but I don't think the United States can go away from such a military organization. This is actually a very important leverage for the United States to impact, to impose an influence on the European economies and to protect the commercial and the geopolitical interests in the European continent. So I think Trump administration this time will continue such a tricky policy toward NATO or toward some other military organization established by the United States and its allies. So this time, I think the Trump administration can continue such momentum of its policy toward the member states in Europe.
Well, indeed, that is.
May I add one thing, which is that Trump, I think, would be willing to lose the control of the island or a large section of the island. That is to say that if he just wandered off and left the alliance on its own, it would be more difficult for him to insist on his priorities.
Well, it's always interesting to see, how different the U.S. government has placed NATO in its national security strategy. But if you're listening to World Today, we're having a panel discussion on whether U.S. allies are ready for a second Trump disruption. We're going to a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion.
As one of CGTN Radio's most popular programs, World Today provides listeners with a strong mix of international news and business. It delivers in-depth analysis of current affairs and one-on-one interviews. You get the stories behind news, not just what's happening, but why.
Welcome back. We're listening to World Today. I'm your host in Beijing. In this edition of the show, we discuss whether American allies are ready for a second Trump disruption. Now, to continue with our discussion, let's see how European countries have reacted and prepared. Because in this Paris meeting with Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, here's what I quote here, our position is clear. Europe is a large economic area with around 450 million citizens. We're strong, we stand together. Europe will not duck and hide. Now, Professor Burke, does his remark represent a united voice from EU member states? What are the critical Trump issues that EU countries might disagree on?
Well, they're not united. That's quite clear. I mean, Hungary, for example, and various other, and Austria, the ones who particularly are at odds with their colleagues in NATO. So in that sense, no, they are not united. Also, they have different economic priorities. The United States can't allow them all, can't accept them all. The thing is, there's always been a core European power bloc, and that's France and Germany. And it's not difficult for us to see right now that they are missing a point. And the new power is just having Poland. So I think that they are at odds about how difficult they think that Putin is going to be. Those on the edge, those which were part of the old Imperial Russia or the Soviet Union, are much more apprehensive than those in the middle, for example. So the thing is that Trump might be considered a minor, might be considered, he is considered a major threat right now, rather more than Putin. But, I mean, you haven't mentioned the UK here, and although it's not any longer part of a united economic area, it is the strongest military power in that area. So it's what's striking to me in near Oxford, where I am, is that the discussions in this country have hardly mentioned Trump. What's dominating, really, are the economic difficulties of the United Kingdom. And that's because, not the expectation, because Britain is as apprehensive as the next country, but there's always been the expectation that somehow, unlike the other European countries, they know how to talk to the Americans. That was one of the great losses of power of Britain when they were in Europe. They were the bridge. They're no longer the bridge. Italy is growing up to become something of the bridge at this point. So the question of a European response, well, yes, but there's a bit of graying of some of the countries about who they actually, push up to shove, are going to support.
Well, then Professor Berg, a quick follow-up on that. Do you think the United Kingdom still has the ability or the privilege of really knowing how to talk to the Americans, and especially under the current British government headed by Keir Starmer?
Well, the real change there is that, again, leaders come and go. Trump is going to be gone in 4 years, unless there's an incredible coup, which I don't believe for a moment is going to happen. And what has always happened with his leadership is that what doesn't change is bureaucracy, the military relationship, that sort of thing, and they are all on the whole by far. So Britain, the difficulty here is that Trump is ripping out what appears to be most of the headship of most of government departments, and therefore it's going to be more difficult for the United Kingdom to pull on its usual relationship. And even great powers have to talk to something. They can't be. A British poet, the cat who walks by himself. So I think that the United Kingdom, after a while, it's going to take a while, and it's going to take them building up their military resources as well, and that they will come back. They will come back, not as a special relationship, which is a very bad term, but it's a necessary relationship.
Well, Professor Aronson, I want your reaction on that, and also in the U.S.-EU relations, what issues really matter for Trump?
A couple of things on that. First, on the EU, Italy is mentioned. Maloney in Italy is going to be very important. Trump gets on with her. He is a bridge with the right wing, the more conservatives in the government. The other person, and Tusk in Poland is obviously important, but the other person who's actually often seen over here as the adult in the room is Pedro Sanchez in Spain. He has, but all of these folks have internal problems. So in Spain, they're balancing the Basques with the conservatives and the Catalans. A lot of the Turkey, which is a huge military force in NATO, is distracted by the Syrian situation. So they're coming together in Europe is extraordinarily difficult. Britain has just sent a new ambassador to the United States who the Trump people don't like. But even a bigger problem is that Trump is firing everybody in sight. So all of the old hands who have decades of relationships with their counterparts throughout Europe, if they're not gone, they're at least pushed to the side. We do have a Secretary of State. He seems oddly as the adult in the room, even though he was very conservative, very anti-Cuba, very anti-China policy, and people are taking relief from him because they don't think he'll blow up the world. They don't think he is going to do anything too crazy in terms of that. But beyond that, you don't know who to talk to. Well, it is who to talk to America. And you just deal with yourself. You have to deal with the others, and we don't have the people in place.
Well, it will be interesting. As Professor Aronson has said, who will be really the point person in terms of the EU-US relations and talks and all that. But you've been listening to World Today. I'm Milton in Beijing. We're discussing EU-US relations with a second Trump disruption. We're going to a short break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion.
Hello, I am Dr. James Rain, a political analyst and international relations scholar specializing in China area studies. World Today offers unmatched in-depth perspectives on China's politics, economics, business, technology and society. World Today's team of reporters and contributors provides valuable information from all of the world's major economies. I hope you can join me on World Today for the very best insights and news from China, on China, and help to build a better understanding of China's role in the world today.
Hi, I'm Ina Taggett, a political and economic analyst and senior fellow at the independent Tiger Institute. World Today is news without the hype and business commentary that is informed and up to date. Presenting the facts and asking incisive questions. So, join us if you are someone who needs to know what is happening in China as it is happening.
Welcome back. You're listening to World Today. I'm Yoko in Beijing. In this edition of the show, we discuss whether U.S. allies are ready for a second Trump disruption. We have with us Kathleen Burke, Professor Emerita of Modern and Contemporary History, University College London, Jonathan Aronson, Professor of Communication and International Relations at University of Southern California. We also have Dr. Teng Jianqun, Director for the Diplomacy Studies Center at Hunan Normal University. Now, continuing with our discussion, I want to take a look at what kind of complications might the Ukraine crisis play into this cross-Atlantic relations at the moment. There have been some new developments regarding the Ukraine crisis since Trump took office. Putin signaled that he's open for dialogue with America. At Davos, Zelensky questioned U.S. commitment. He said, will President Trump even notice Europe? And Trump announced on his Truth social network that if Russia does not stop the war now, Russia should expect tariffs and sanctions. Dr. Teng, what do you think Trump's eventual aim is regarding the Ukraine crisis?
I think his number one aim is to stop end the crisis of conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And the second, Trump administration would like to paint the European countries as the major supporter to Ukraine, and the United States or the European countries can continue the sanctions against Russia. But I think Trump administration can give some changes in its policy toward Russia, toward Ukraine, toward European countries, and the main focus for Trump's diplomacy is in Asia-Pacific region to engage such so-called strategic competition with China. European countries might be a little bit embarrassed at this time because the almost 3 years conflict between Russia and Ukraine has already gave a very negative impact on the social and economic development in European countries. And Trump administration would like to withdraw from the conflict, including economic support and weapon system support to Ukraine. And Trump would like to have a face-to-face dialogue with President Putin of Russia. So I think the situation in the crisis or in the conflict can be changed by the policy changes of the United States. By the change of Trump administration.
Well, Professor Burke, so what does the EU as a whole, I'm not talking about individual member states, but overall, what does the EU as a whole want regarding the Ukraine crisis? And also, how might European countries react to possible U.S. position of really retreating from the Ukraine crisis and put more energy and focus on the Asia-Pacific, particularly China?
Well, they would be extremely upset. I think what they're rather hoping is that Trump will decide that letting Russia actually keep the four parts of Ukraine that it says they've won, and they want to keep their spoils, and 20% of the Ukraine land. And I think, obviously, that Europe does not want this to happen, because if Putin succeeds with this, who's next? Estonia really worries that it's going to be next. Of course, the Baltics are the worries. truth. But is that Trump he's fearful that it might be seen that he's being weak, that he's giving in to Russia. So that must be one consideration. And then everyone says, as it were, that he really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. And the question is whether he thinks that forcing the fighting to stop will actually gain in that as a peacemaker. But on the other hand, Ukrainians won't stop fighting. It's been quite clear. In fact, they've said that if this happens, they will still continue to fight, and Russia will have on its hands a rather daunting guerrilla war. And there's no doubt that everyone has come to realize that not only the Ukrainians don't want this to happen, they will continue to fight, but they've shown themselves so innovative on the battlefield, making their own